You're listening to The Secrets of Doctor Who, where we discuss everything about the hit BBC series, Doctor Who. And today we're discussing the latest episode of the 15th Doctor's first season, The Legend of Ruby Sunday. I'm Dom Bettinelli, and joining me today on the panel are Jimmy Akin. Hey, Jimmy.
Howdy, Dom.
And Father Cory Sticha. Hey, Father Cory.
How's it going?
Folks, remember to like The Secrets of Doctor Who on Facebook, where we're at facebook.com/Secrets of Doctor Who. Retweet us on Twitter, where we're at SQPN or X, whatever you want to call it. Leave us comments wherever you find us on social media. And be sure to stick around to the end of the episode. We have more, so much more of your great listener feedback that we want to discuss. And before we get into today's episode, I want to tell you about another show on the StarQuest Network you're sure to enjoy called The Secrets of Sacred Art, which you can find wherever fine podcasts are found or at sqpn.com/art. All right, Jimmy, I know this is going to be an epic recap. Why don't you give us the recap of The Legend of Ruby Sunday?
It's not that bad, actually, but here we go. This week, the Doctor and Ruby head back to unit headquarters, and they want help finding the woman who's been appearing wherever the TARDIS lands. They quickly learn that on Earth, this woman is named Susan Triad, and the name of her technology company, S Triad, is an anagram of TARDIS. The Doctor also mentions that his granddaughter was named Susan and that Time Lords can regenerate, so Susan Triad might be her. They also get a videotape from old closed-circuit television of the night Ruby was dropped off at the church on Christmas Eve 2004, and they plug it into a time window the unit has to revisit that night. They aren't able to see the face of the woman that dropped Ruby off, but something strange happens with a dark cloud with red when a dark cloud with red backlighting appears. The Doctor has former companion Mel take him to Susan Triad. He doesn't seem to recognize her as Susan, but she does remember dreams of appearing wherever the TARDIS did. As she's making a speech, the dark cloud appears around the TARDIS back at unit headquarters, and it possesses one of the unit officers and also transforms Susan Triad into a hideous pseudo-monster human. It reveals that itself as the ancient god Sutekh, and it offers Sutekh's gift of death to the Doctor and all of the world. The end.
All right. So the return of Sutekh.
I was going to return that gift, but
Do you still get the receipt on that?
I put life on my gift list. Sorry.
So, Father Cory, your overall impression of this one?
This was quite the whirlwind. I mean, the Jimmy did a good job summarizing it, but it was quite the whirlwind of an adventure. It was fun. There was a lot of stuff going on, a lot of connections both throughout the season and throughout Classic Who as well. This reaches back into Classic Who, of course, with Sutekh. I really enjoyed this. This was a lot of fun. You know, Mel got to kind of stand up to the Doctor and tell him basically to quit sulking and get at it, get back at it. And that was fun to see. It was interesting to find out the conclusion of who this, mysterious woman was that keeps showing up. And I'm looking forward to next week. I'm looking forward to how they wrap this up, because this was a good episode.
Jimmy?
Well, I liked it. I thought it was well done. We get some revelations, but not a whole lot. We still don't really know what Susan Triad is. We still don't know who Ruby Sunday is. They're obviously connected with Sutekh, and for people who are just familiar with New Who, Sutekh did appear back in the Fourth Doctor's time in an episode called Pyramids of Mars, and he very definitely outclassed the Fourth Doctor in that. He was like, "You are a tiny Time Lord, I will crush you." So the Doctor is up against a really dangerous foe this time, and I'm looking forward to see how they pay all this off, because this was really the setup act for next week, and so I'm interested in what's going to happen next week.
They have set up a big story. Like, if they can pay it off, it'll be great.
And apparently it's going to be a longer one than normal. It's like 55 minutes instead of 45 minutes.
Good.
So my thoughts, they're leaned into the misdirection, like this idea of they really leaned into the Susan, Triad being Susan Foreman.
I think Susan's going to show up, though. They've made too big a promise with all that, and so I think that we're going to get Carol Ann Ford, which is what I want. I want Carol Ann Ford as Susan.
I think we're going to get Susan, but it's not going to be Carolyn Ford. I think. I think it'll. Well, we'll get into that. I don't want to spoil my thoughts there. For so much talk of connecting with new viewers with the new Doctor, they've really brought in so much of the classic, of the mythology of old classic Who. It's kind of interesting to do that. Now they try to explain it along the way, but there's still a lot of the lore coming in on this one, which is great for those of us who are fans of the whole breadth of Doctor Who. But I wonder, for people who are new to Who this season, how this is landing for them. I'd love to know.
One thing they're doing now, y'all will recall that before this season, they had a kind of an internet-only miniseries called Tales of the TARDIS, where they brought back actors who watched classic episodes of Doctor Who. And they're doing something similar for this. So the new episode comes out on Friday, but this Thursday, they're having another episode of Tales of the TARDIS come out. And it's apparently going to be the Doctor, the 15th Doctor, Ruby, and Mel watching Pyramids of Mars.
Oh, nice.
Because Tom Baker is, in his 90s now, and Sarah Jane Smith is departed, and so they can't really bring them back easily. But apparently that's going to help serve to catch up the new viewers on who Sutekh is and how dangerous he is.
Okay.
That'll be great. Yeah.
That's a good idea.
Well, and this whole season has been kind of an explanation. I mean, they've been doing where the Doctor has been explaining a lot of things, like what's the TARDIS and who is he and history. We see a little bit of that where he's explaining who Susan is and kind of giving a little misdirection of where Susan comes from, by the way. Because he talks about having a granddaughter before having a daughter. So there's a little misdirection of how the timeline works there.
Well, I don't know if I'd call it misdirection. It's interesting if they follow up on that, because it's possible for him to have a daughter in the future and then Susan is his granddaughter in the past.
Exactly.
That works. But there have been multiple instances, including in episodes written by Russell T Davies, talking about, oh yeah, I've been a dad, as if it's in the past, and so he's really hit that nail on the head hard several times of I have been a dad.
Right.
And so I don't know what they're going to do with that if they want to follow up on this.
I did like the fact that, speaking of, bringing things up, talking about his connections to UNIT and Kate's dad, and he was the best of men. I just love hearing the Brigadier described as the best of men. Like,
especially for all the grief the Doctor gave him.
Yeah. I love the Brigadier.
I think Sergeant Benton was the best of men in that era, but
yeah,
Benton was pretty good too. He didn't get the credit he deserved, I think. I like the fact that the unit headquarters, I should have mentioned this in the specials. Unit headquarters is the Avenger building for some reason. Like it's the same building. It's kind of funny.
Once Tony Stark died, they had to sell it to someone, and so they bought it. Unit bought it
and moved it to
because
London.
Of course they can.
Yeah. They introduced a few new members of UNIT, including the 13-year-old boy genius. What was his name? Wilson, I think, or something like
Morris.
that. Morris
Gibbons.
Morris Gibbons. Okay. So Morris, and then the archivist, who ends up being Harriet, who ends up being another Harbinger. H.
Arbinger. Yep.
We get this description of Susan Triad. They really go into all these things that we talked about last time, where like her name is an anagram of TARDIS, and like it's fun how they anticipated how the fans would interpret these things, and they put it on the screen. I do like that he described her as 60 and middle-aged. Thank you, Russell T Davies. I appreciate that.
Well, I love the where the Doctor's talking about figures it out, and they're all kind of going, yeah, we already knew that. In the colonel that's standing guard, there's like, even I got this one.
And what they say. Kate says, evil genius with secret alien software. We've stopped enough of them, except the obvious. What was she referring to? Was that a jab at somebody in real world, or?
I have a feeling that was one of those lines of Russell T Davies has a certain evil genius tech billionaire in mind, or at least he views as an evil genius.
Like maybe Musk or
Bill Gates, or
Zuckerberg.
Zuckerberg, or somebody like that.
Yeah.
Pick your political persuasion, and it's whoever's against that.
Okay. One thing that kind of course, they have to pay off is this whole, like, they really lean into or spend a lot of time on this mystery of who Ruby's mother is. And it raises the question for me is, like, I know why in the big sense, but why is UNIT, when we've got Susan Triad about to do this big thing, why are they spending so much time and effort on the question of Ruby's identity, which doesn't seem at all related inside the story?
Well, A, because the doctor told them to, but B, they try to relate it by saying, so we've got two mystery women. One you know a ton about, Susan Triad, and one who you know nothing about, Ruby's mother. Could they be the same person? Right. And so they tried to relate them in that way. Morris has that line.
Yeah. Which would make Ruby the doctor's great granddaughter, if that were the case, if she were really Susan.
Right. Yeah. And apparently they are going to be related, because Susan Triad is hooked up to Sutek and the TARDIS. And Ruby Sunday's, origin story is now apparently hooked up to Sutek too. Right. There is a connection that I think that's clearly, it just didn't seem like a connection before they made the connection. You know what I mean? Like, why are they making this big deal? Now, here's where I get into the other mystery woman in this episode, which is Mrs. Flood. Cherry Sunday, Ruby's adopted mother, is called into UNIT, so she calls Mrs. Flood to come watch over. Not Carla. Cherry Sunday. Carla. It calls her to watch over Cherry, and Mrs. Flood has this sort of this sinister turn in this scene where you're not going to get what you want. I think that's misdirection. Yeah, I think that Mrs. Flood is stating fact, but is not meant to be a villain herself. Right.
Yeah.
That's my guess. Because what she does, as soon as Carla leaves, Cherry says, "I'd love a cup of tea." And Mrs. Flood says, "Would you, sweetheart? Well, we'd all like a bunch of things that aren't going to happen." And Cherry says, "What are you talking about?" And she says, "There's a storm coming." And then she looks at the camera again and breaks the fourth wall and says, "He waits no more."
Right.
See, this is where I think Mrs. Flood is going to be Susan. I think because she says just before this, as she arrives, as Carla greets her at the door, "Oh, thank you for coming." "Well, I'm always hiding away," she says. And, remember that first episode where she says, to the neighbor guy, I forget what it is, and then looks at the camera and breaks the fourth wall for the first time. "Haven't you ever seen a TARDIS before?" She knows what the TARDIS is. She's been hiding away.
Yeah, maybe, but so if she was Susan, I see two problems. The first one is when she sees the TARDIS dematerialize, she recognizes it as a TARDIS, but this is 2024. You don't normally see police boxes on the streets of London anymore. And so if she was Susan, she should have recognized it before it dematerialized. Right. The second thing is Carol Ann Ford is still around and active and attending Doctor Who events, including with Russell T Davies. I think she has to be brought back if you're going to bring back Susan at this point.
I get that. Although if they had brought her back as Mrs. Flood in that first episode, the game would be up. Like, we would all know.
Yeah. So I don't deny that Mrs. Flood could be a version of Susan. I just think we're going to get Carol Ann Ford before the end.
That would be nice. I'm in favor of that. Don't get me wrong. I am in favor of that.
I'm waiting for a twist, though. I'm waiting for, just like with the Susan Triad, I'm waiting for Mrs. Flood to have a twist that she isn't Susan, but she's somebody that maybe has a background with the Doctor.
Another misdirection.
Another misdirection. I mean, this seems like the kind of thing that Russell T Davies likes to tweak on stuff like this. Oh yeah, this is what's going to be. This was going to be. Oh, never mind.
What if it's like Lita, who was
Lita or Leela?
Sorry, Leela. Okay, I always get those mixed up. This is not Futurama. Yeah. What if it's Leela, who was left behind on Gallifrey? So she would have become she would have
Yeah.
presumably over time.
Louise Jameson is even harder because she's still around too. She's still doing doctor work, and she can't regenerate, unlike Susan.
No,
that's
she's
right.
only
That's right.
human.
Yeah. Just throw it out there. Yeah.
Unless she got injected with Time Lord DNA or something like that. But
they did the timeless child thing to her. Whatever. Now we're getting way in the weeds, so let's not do that. So they do address this idea of why the Doctor has never gone back to see Susan. I mean, it comes up, which is a good point, because that's often a question that fans have asked. Well, why didn't? In fact, the 12th Doctor skims past that a little bit in that episode where he's teaching at the university. He's got a picture of Susan on the desk, and he doesn't really address it, but they kind of bring it up here. What did you think of that?
Yeah. So what the Doctor says, because Kate asks him, "Why haven't you ever visited your granddaughter?" And he says, "I bring disaster, Kate." Yep. And what if I brought disaster into her new life?
Yeah. Did you buy it?
I think it's a good retcon. It's not the real reason he hasn't visited her, but it's a good in-universe explanation.
Right. The time window. We've seen time windows before, right? This is in both Classic Who, I think in the Sarah Jane Adventures, and in New Who, what was it? The Girl in the Fireplace had a time window. That's how he saw her through the fireplace.
Yeah,
traveled
and ended up going through it. Yep.
Right. Despite Unit has a time window, despite being told back in the 70s not to experiment with time technology by the Doctor.
Yeah. And it's the same kind of thing as Ace. Do you have any of that Nitro 9 you're not supposed to have?
Yeah.
Good.
Right.
But this was a much more primitive time window where it was more like a time projector where you saw like a holographic projection of time instead of actually being in time.
Yeah, this I thought was kind of sketchy in the writing because if it's really a time window, they don't need a VHS.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And so, that's this doesn't really make a lot of sense.
A line went by really fast where it was like, if we have a tape, we can see where
amplify it and stuff like that. And
we can see where the snowflakes were, and that will give us like a map of the time or something. I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They also talk about we can sharpen the image, and it's like, oh, great. Another TV enhance image thing. That's like, that does not work. That is not a real thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You've got this basically snow-covered CCTV VCR footage. It's not going to work.
Yeah.
But no, like a time window is literally like a window into time where you can open it and go through it, not just like it'd be like saying, well, if I don't have footage off my Ring doorbell, I can't look out my front window to see what's going on. It's
not like the time TV that the first Doctor had. This is a, like a Russian oligarch. You can go through that window to the other side. Sorry. So Carla is brought to Unit, and I think mainly to provide that anchor, that emotional anchor for Ruby in the story.
It really doesn't make a lot of sense. They have Rose Noble come with Ruby Sunday back to her house to get the VHS, and Carla looks at Rose and says, because she's a teenager apparently, or he's a teenager, says, how are you in Unit? And Rose says, my mom is part of it. And, oh, well, if your mom is part of it, then I'm going too. It's like, that's a really loose connection.
Yeah. But I do feel like Carla is the first mom in Doctor Who that Russell T Davies has really done right. Done justice to.
Well, that has been written in a way that's not annoying. I mean, I think he ultimately did right by Jackie Tyler. She just had a long character arc to get there.
Yeah. And Carla has had like alternate versions of her where she wasn't the good mom, but the prime version, if we should say that, of Carla, I think really comes across as good mom. She's a good mom, which I like to see. Well,
and she was there, first of all, like you said, for the emotional support for Ruby while they're in the time window, but then also for that scene where they're clearing the deck, and she says, she wants Ruby to go with her, and Ruby says, you need to go. Thank you. I love you. Goodbye.
Right.
You have to have kind of that where no, that disconnect from her.
Right. Because it feels like Ruby's about to, emerge from a chrysalis, or, you know what I mean? Be, interesting
Something
they had that
more than
butterfly
she
thing.
seems. Something more
Yeah.
than she seems.
Ruby's not going back to her old life, certainly. Carl,
we'll have to see, but certainly they're setting us up for that possibility.
Yep.
Yeah. When the amorphous black shadow thing emerges from inside the time window, Carla calls it the Beast, which is perhaps a biblical reference to the Beast of Revelation.
Beast
that idea
that they met in Russell T Davies' time,
right?
His first run.
You mean the giant Satan?
Yeah, because that's what that was called.
Yeah, the Beast. Yep. There was a lot going on in that scene, the time window, and I'm not sure if I've even unpacked it in my own mind, even now as we talk about it. But there's the Ruby's mom, who everyone presumes it's Ruby's mom, but whoever the cloaked figure is, and then there's a jump in the tape so they don't get a good look under the hood, which is kind of a strange, I don't know, artificial constraint, I guess.
Yep.
Well, and there was some the chronoton particles or whatever the thing runs on, glitched up at that point, and it's
a convenient glitch, to amp up the drama, I think. And then as soon as not Colonel Chidozi, who was the other guy who actually died, the guard that was in there
died.
Yeah, Chidozi is the one that went behind the TARDIS and died.
Was it Chidozi? I thought it was the other guy.
Nope.
Oh, okay. No, sorry. So Chidozi, as soon as he went behind the TARDIS, I'm like, that guy's dead. Like, that guy's gone. Like, there was, I don't know what it was about the way they shot that. Like you wouldn't normally just see someone disappear behind something like that and not follow them. I don't know what it was, but it was very strange. But it was like clearly, and it was super creepy. His voice coming from, where are you? I'm in hell. Like that was super creepy. That gave me chills. But I guess I'm trying to figure out what was that all about? Was that thing back?
It was
in time.
It was demonstrating the threat, and in terms of was Sutek back in 2004? Yeah, maybe, probably, but it's so ambiguous.
Right.
What they do with the time television and the VHS that it's hard to tell, what's real at this point. But they killed Colonel. He's our red shirt for this episode.
Yeah.
And I like that Kate blames the doctor.
She's so mad.
Yeah.
That was good. I'm like, because I hate when characters get killed off and it's sort of like we all move on and nobody says anything. It's like, no, let's be mad that this guy's dead. That was good. And I guess
the doctor was in control of the situation and he let Colonel Chidozi die.
Yes,
because he was even telling the colonel to go scout around.
Yeah,
even though they weren't supposed to move.
Right, and Kate was trying to stop him from doing it.
Yeah. And that really leans into the doctor, like how the doctor sometimes can be very cold-blooded about things. Like he is, for all his rhetoric, willing to sacrifice people at times, or really at least to put them at grave risk in order to accomplish the greater good, apparently. But it was interesting to see him do that, knowing he probably had a good sense of what was going to happen there. So it's interesting.
So one thing I wanted to comment on that we've kind of skipped past a little bit is Susan Twist. I like the fact that, they've had Mel watching her and they've even embedded Mel in her publicity team, and she's got some new magical technology whose nature is not clear to me that she's going to announce to the world. It's going to change everything and stuff. But nevertheless, they tell us and they show us she's really nice. She's not some megalomaniacal high-tech billionaire. She's a genuinely nice person. And we see that in her interactions with her staff, where she's like questioning stuff, is like, do you think this is over the top? I mean, it's just me, Yeah. And that's nice. I like that. And then she has this complete turn at the end, which I assume is Sutek possessing her, because she becomes completely evil and her face distorts and stuff like that. And given how nice she was earlier, I'm guessing that she really is a nice person that Sutek is now possessing, but maybe not. Who knows?
Well, and they kind of foreshadowed that she was a chrysalis, where she's nice now, but
true.
she could change.
Yeah.
So because they specifically use that phrase, that she's but this was in the sense of Mel had a little palm DNA scanner thing that she was able to get a little bit of Susan's DNA, and they read it that she was just a nice human being. And then they mentioned she could be a chrysalis, she could be more, but this was again in the misdirection that she was actually Susan Foreman.
All the versions of Susan Triad, though, in all the different realities, including ones that we didn't see.
Mm-hmm. That was nice, by the way, because in the last time, in the next time episode last week, they showed us, different images of Susan Twist. And then there were these couple of really disturbing ones where she looks like she's got horns and she looks like she's a cyborg. And they made him flicker on screen, so we didn't get a good look at him. But in this, that's just a fake out. Those are just images of Susan Triad from 2 adventures we didn't see.
Yep.
Right. And the fact that she exists across these realities, it leads me to believe that she's not real. Like, she's not a real person, the Susan Triad.
So she's someone that Sutek created.
Yeah. Right. Along the lines of the Harbingers.
There's the assumption that, this is something the TARDIS is doing. It's like, well, no, this is, and the Harbinger, because one of them is a Harbinger, that Harriet was a Harbinger for Sutek. Right.
So I wanted to talk about Sutek and the TARDIS, because I think it bears looking at how the Pyramid of Mars ended, because the Doctor was going to lose that. There was no way the Doctor was going to win. The only way he defeated Sutek in the Pyramid of Mars was to use the TARDIS console to shift the mouth of a a space-time tunnel that Sutek was going to use to travel from Mars to Earth. He shifted it into the far future, and so Sutek was stuck in that and sent into the far future. Although it sounds like Sutek has been in the TARDIS ever since then. Yep. He's been part of it.
Well, maybe they'll have to clarify this for us next week. It could be he got on board the TARDIS in 2004.
And that's what they were showing in the time tunnel or the time window, because when they scanned it at that point said, wait, that's the TARDIS.
Yeah. And it could have been some intervening point, but because the first appearance we had of Susan Triad was actually back in Wild Blue Yonder, which was before the Doctor met Ruby Sunday. And so before he went to that 2004. So it could be he's been part of the TARDIS for a while, but not necessarily all the way back to the 4th Doctor's time.
Right.
Okay. And the TARDIS makes this groaning noise, like as when it's like sort of sick or something. Have we ever heard that before?
We did Abbey Road. Then it mentions that when they were walking across, or when they were walking across Abbey Road, the TARDIS made that groan, and it sounds like the TARDIS dematerialization sound slowed way down, is what it sounds like.
That's a good point. And then there's a whole exposition where we get mention of all of these other figures, like Harriet gives this litany of the other figures of this pantheon. So we had the Toy Maker, the Trickster, Maestro, and then some new names: Reprobate, Malice, Mischief, Misery.
No, that's so it's the Toy Maker, god of games; Trickster, god of traps; Maestro, god of music; Reprobate, god of spite; Mara, god of beasts.
Yep.
Threefold deity of malice, mischief, and misery; Incensor, god of disaster, and her children doubt and dread; and then the mother, father, other of them all: Set, Seth, Setek, and Sutek.
Yep.
Right. Those are the different names for.
Yeah.
And Mara we've seen going back to Kinda and Snake Dance.
Right.
The snake
Mara.
that infested, Tegan.
Tegan.
Thank you. I don't know why I blanked on her name.
Interesting. So, what do you think of, and apparently, by the way, the same actor who voiced Sutek in the Fourth Doctor's story, it was brought back to voice Sutek again.
Oh, really?
So that's fun.
Okay.
Gabriel Wolf played Sutek in
the
Fourth Doctor, and then he voiced him for this. He's like 90 some years old, and he came back to voice it, which is awesome.
There's some audio cleanup on that recording. What did you think of Sutek as being the big bad, that we've been the one who waits?
Well, I think it's fine, and so that's cleared up now. That we did get an answer on that. The one who waits is Sutek.
Yeah,
and so that's nice. We've got sort of two versions of Sutek at the moment. There's the one at unit headquarters that's sitting on top of the TARDIS, which is kind of like a multi-eyed wolf.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's the Susan Twist monster person, servant of Sutek, at her headquarters, like a mile away.
Mm-hmm.
And so they're and they actually intercut between them, including on the vocal level, as they're doing that. Like Sutek will finish a sentence from the Susan Twist monster, and it's not. I'm fine with Sutek being the big bad. That's great. I want to see what happens next.
Yep.
Right. We did not get
I don't have so much to say about it. I mean, one thing I'm not wild about is the wolf version of Sutek.
Right.
Or Jackal on top of the
TARDIS. I'm not impressed.
It looks very CGI.
Yeah, the humanoid version of Sutek back from the Fourth Doctor's time, where he just had a helmet,
right?
With eyes and no mouth and nose. I mean, that I think is more impressive than the wolf version.
Now it'll be interesting to see if they keep the Cloud wolf version, or if they have him resolve into a more humanoid figure.
Right. Yeah, I mean, what they've set up is, the biggest of all baddies, right? I mean, we're sort of the universal stakes again. It's just one of the things we have often discussed on the story. And when some of us have, they reach the stakes too high. It's always the highest of stakes possible, and this is it. Like, this is the destruction of the universe. I mean, what do you think of? Is it worth it? Is it okay in this instance?
It's fine. It's fine. It's another big season ender, and so they tend to do these things for season enders. I might, if I was showrunner, which I'll never be on Doctor Who, I might go the other direction and have a small stakes season finale where it's just these people trying to survive, and they do. But I think it would be fascinating to build. We're putting our main characters' lives on the line, and as the season ender, and they survive, and that's it, and that's enough.
Right.
Like a companion's life is at stake. Do they survive or not? That would be an interesting.
But they got that Disney money to spend, so they got to spend it on the big flashy season ending.
Whereas, will the companion survive? I mean, that's Caves of Androzani.
Yeah. True.
Yeah.
Something some fans have brought up is the problem that Russell T Davies made for himself, which is, where's the 14th Doctor in all this? Why would he not be there to provide, allied support?
I saw something about that. Someone commented that there actually is a clue in this episode that indicates the 14th Doctor and Donna are on some assignment at the moment. So like they may not be on Earth. I didn't catch what the clue was, but apparently there was a line of dialogue or something.
Yeah. It was when they first talked to Rose. They said something about how are they doing? They're fine. They're off on assignment, or and maybe Donna's gift of always missing everything is rubbing off on the 14th Doctor.
Right. That's true. Anything else to say about this one? Before I do get it, I do want to note, to be continued, no teaser for next week, which is, that's not surprising.
Although Russell T Davies does have a teaser where he teases it.
Oh, I didn't see that.
But I won't spoil it.
Nope.
Okay.
Because he doesn't really spoil it, but you can go find his teaser if you want.
Okay. Father Cory, your final thoughts on this one?
So the line about bringing Sutek's gift of death, that actually comes from Pyramids of Mars, where there's a alien servant of Sutek that talks about how Sutek is bringing his gift of death to everyone in the world.
Right, because Seth was the god of death in the underworld, right, Jimmy?
No, that's Osiris.
Right.
Set is Osiris's brother who killed him and made him dead.
Right.
So he did have kind of a gift of death for Osiris. He's also the god of he's sometimes the god of evil, sometimes not. He's also the god of undertakers.
Oh,
so in ancient Egypt, the undertakers were known as the sons of Set.
Okay, the sunsets.
Oh,
anything else, Father Cory?
I got a kick out of Mel chasing around on her little motor scooter. Moped.
Yes. Good to see Mel at it again.
It was really nice.
Jimmy?
Yeah. So I had one other thing about this. I noticed because one of the big criticisms of the current Russell T Davies era is the level of woke that he's put into stuff. And I have a praise and a criticism in this regard. As I was watching it, I noticed how much we have going on with these women who are interested. And we've got Susan Twist, we've got Mrs. Flood, we've got Ruby's mom, we've got Carla, we've got Kate. Yeah. And so we've got all these women who are interesting characters, and I thought this is really nice. What they did here, unlike in a lot of venues, is they created new characters who all happen to be female, and they're telling an interesting story with them.
Mm-hmm.
And that's great. I love that. It's better than recasting and replacing established characters. But what they also did was they surrounded these women with the most non-representative cast possible for Britain. Because if you look at everyone around these women, there are transgender characters, there are midgets, there are people from Southeast Asia, there are other women, and there's okay, this is Britain. There should be a few white men in this mix, and there aren't. Yeah. You look at everybody at Unit, none of the characters who have speaking parts are white men. None. Yeah. And you look at Susan Twist's staff, none of them are white men. Mm-hmm. Now, I don't have any problem with diversity, but when you're pushing it to a ridiculous extreme, it hurts the writing and it hurts the believability. Because this is not a TV show set in India or sub-Saharan Africa or China. It's okay to show people who represent the local culture and the historic local culture. It's not all a nation of immigrants. So I thought that I liked the characters they introduced who happen to be women, and they're telling interesting stories with them. But they're surrounding them with people who are clearly there just to represent tick boxes on a checklist of woke. They are not there. This was not an unbiased casting process where they just opened these parts up to whoever showed up. They were consciously going for, we want to represent everybody we can except for ordinary white men.
Right. I don't think I think you're right. There's not a single speaking part for a white man.
I think that the one soldier that was on the unit main bridge, however you want to put it, he looked probably the closest.
Yeah, but even he's the earlier one. No. Even he had if I recall correctly, he had an Arabic name.
Right. Yeah. I'm trying to find it now. But yes, you're right. Yeah,
So,
it is
like I
weird
said, he
now
was
that
the
you mention it.
closest, yeah. I mean, it's just the closest. So, again, he was kind of in the background a couple of times, and that was about it, and had a couple of speaking lines.
Mhm.
So,
Yeah, I mean, it is kind of in a way like being a erasure. It's being erased. It's
Mhm.
kind of weird.
So.
Yeah, good point. All right, so we just have to wait to the Empire of Death to find out the resolution to all this stuff, and so we've set it all up. Time to bring it all home. Before we go, we have listener feedback we wanted to share with you and discuss. First feedback comes on Space Babies and the Devil's Cord. Carolyn on Spotify. That's right. You can leave a comment on Spotify now on any of our shows. And Carolyn says, Jinx killed it as the maestro. I've never seen the Doctor so afraid of another being. You have now. I guess I need to watch the specials because I missed something with the toy maker and who the powerful beings are. Yes, definitely need to watch the specials.
Yeah. And the idea that there's more than just a toy maker kind of goes by quickly in the specials, but it is something where he talks about how there's somebody who is so much greater than him that even the toy maker fled.
Yeah. And that's the one who waits, who we now know is Sutek.
Yep.
That's right. Then on our discussion of Dot and Bubble and Rogue, Katarina via Facebook writes, Dot and Bubble thoughts. It very much felt like the humans were the monsters all along story, and I appreciated it a lot. Rogue thoughts. I agree with y'all's assessments. The story was implausible given its historical inaccuracies. The characters, other than Rogue, were also boring, and their deaths seemed so inconsequential. Maybe that was intentional so that the relationships between the Doctor and Ruby and the Doctor and Rogue would stand out more. As far as the Doctor's love interest, aside from my religious and philosophical issues with it, I also don't really like the idea of the Doctor falling in love and acting on it so quickly. It felt less love-like and more lusty. For me, the Doctor has always been a bit Christ-like in his genuine regard for the humanity and personhood of the people he meets. When he has fallen in love, he's done so because of the remarkableness of the person, and he's, for lack of a better phrase, quote, guarded his hearts and the heart of his lover, end quote. Maybe you could argue with this Doctor being unburdened, that he doesn't have to, but I don't think I don't know if that really works when in this same episode he mentions how he's lost everyone. I think having the Doctor take his time in his relationships allows viewers to better enter the story and identify with the companions. Rogue, on the other hand, felt more like a toy than a person to the Doctor, and I don't like that at all. I agree. I don't like the Doctor treating people like toys. I think the Doctor is best when he treats them. That's what sets the Doctor apart from all these powerful beings. Michael on Facebook writes, Dot and Bubble thoughts. I think it was perhaps a bit deliberate in its racism/classism ambiguity to reduce the hate it would get, and the subtlety is one of Russell's great talents as showrunner. He can comment on most things while leaving it to something you only process in the back of your mind.
He can when he wants to be.
Yep.
He can.
True.
On Rogue, admittedly, same-sex attraction is something I have a lot of compassion for, as I have many friends who experience it while striving to obey the church's teaching, and so can understand a degree in which it can be appreciated to be represented. That said, I do think Rogue was obnoxiously in your face about it, though I see a redeeming factor. In the Catechism, it speaks of the value of disinterested friendship, and classical philosophy views love of friends as greater than romance. Rogue hints at this by having Rogue recognize the Doctor as unable to lose Ruby, and thus sentences himself to permanent banishment to save her and the Doctor. While, as I write this, it spawns an idea this may be the origin of the one who waits that we'll simply have to wait and see. Regardless, Space Babies and Rogue have both had subtle counter-statements to their attempts at liberal propaganda, where the liberal statement is undercut by a broader message that babies are good and life is sacred, and friendship is greater than a homosexual romance. Good take. Thank you, Michael. I appreciate you sending that in. The Cloister Bell on YouTube writes, definitely an anticipated review. There certainly was a lot to cover. Dot and Bubble was a mixture of the detriment of social media turned up to 11 and the horror aspect of the gastropod/tractator-like creatures. The alphabetical killing was absurd, in my opinion. I agree with your assessment of the romantic aspect of Rogue. I would very much like if they adopted the classic series model of the Doctor not having any romantic interest in anyone at all. Thanks, Paul McGann. I would agree with that. I think that's probably better. Would be better for the series.
And by the way, the AI killing or the alphabetical killing sounds very artificial intelligence, where It's
Yes.
just kill by this list.
Yeah, right.
Also, we've done River Song now, and now that we've done River Song, I don't see much potential for future romance with the Doctor. It'll be old.
Yes. Kalisha Bell continues. Good to see Indira in this. She played Susie Costello in Torchwood. Most will recognize her from Game of Thrones these days, although I will add, I recognize her from Star Wars Kenobi, where she had a really nice role as an undercover rebel. Spoilers. Lots of speculation on where the last two stories will go. I very much look forward to hearing your thoughts. Cheers, guys. Doug's Film and TV writes, good review of Dot and Bubble. Here are my thoughts. But before I start, how many of you have an Alexa or a Google Home Assistant? If you do, get rid of it before it turns on you, LOL. Let's get started on Dot and Bubble. I will say it was a clever episode, and I really liked how they did it. When I first watched this, it was an interesting take on social media because you have people or teens that would be on their phone, and it's all about me, because their world is surrounded by things online. I will say, you really do like Lindy Pepperbean, and when we get close to the ending and they get Ricky, and she got Ricky September killed, that was just cold, and that was not necessary. I will say, when I first saw this, I was confused by the ending, and I was like, what is the ending supposed to be about? My thoughts on Rogue, and I do agree with you all on this. The story does have good production values, and the LGBT stuff is too much, and it felt like it was shoved down your throat. I'm looking forward to your review on The Legend of Ruby Sunday and The Empire of Death, and just to make this fun, can you record your reaction of the twist villain? Sorry, we didn't record ourselves watching it, although if you're watching the video now, this was pretty much my reaction when Sutek appeared.
Yeah.
So I made a big gasping face.
Yep.
So, and then Ted via email writes, I have enjoyed this season, and I think that the writing has been the best for several years. My brief observations for the two recently reviewed episodes are as follows. I enjoyed the creepiness of Dot and Bubble, and now I know what Black Mirror is. I found myself rooting for Lindy, but it was disturbing how naive all the Bubble people were. Is there an answer as to why this group of people from ages 17 to 27 were in Fine Time? At first, I thought that maybe their world was dying and their parents sent them to Fine Time to keep them safe, but was it some sort of rite of passage to spend time there before they entered adulthood?
I think yes. This is kind of like going to college or going to prep school or having a summer job for them before you take on full adult responsibilities.
Yeah.
And
it
they
kind
were also because they were all the rich kids, they could afford to take 10 years and go do 2 hours a day of basically data processing.
Right. It kind of felt a little like, the privileged class has to show that their kids, aren't just the idle rich, but they're actually doing something when they're really not. At the end of the episode, I had no sympathy for Lindy and the Fine Timers, and in a way, I was happy that they didn't go with the Doctor. Not very nice of me, I suppose. The racial aspect of the episode did not occur to me until I heard some discussion about it on the internet. I did notice the lack of diversity in the bubble, but that was it. Russell T. Davies did a brilliant job of putting the message out there and letting the viewer decide without it being shoved down the viewer's throat. As for Rogue, beyond the sexual content, I thought the episode was okay. I watched the first season of Bridgerton with my wife, and I was not the demographic that enjoyed that series, so I had a negative view of the episode. One line that I liked was when Rogue and the Doctor were walking toward their ships, and Rogue's ship uncloaked itself, and Rogue asked the Doctor why he didn't cloak his ship or shed, and the Doctor said, "It's behind a tree." I thought that line was funny. That
was a good line.
Yeah, that was clever.
That was a good line. So that's all our feedback. Thank you all for sending it in. We really do appreciate the feedback and what it adds to the show. And now we'd like to take a moment to thank our patrons who make it possible for us to create the Secrets of Doctor Who, including Jenny N., Matt and Yolanda C., Sean F., Rachel T., and Bob C. Their generous donations at sqpn.com/give make it possible for us to continue the Secrets of Doctor Who and all the shows at StarQuest, and you can join them by visiting sqpn.com/give. That's it from us. What did you think of The Legend of Ruby Sunday? You can let us know by commenting on the show at sqpn.com, the Secrets of Doctor Who Facebook page. Send an email to drwho@sqpn.com. Visit the StarQuest Discord community at sqpn.com/discord, or leave a comment on our YouTube channel where you can watch us on the Secrets of Doctor Who at youtube.com/StarQuestMedia. We'll be back next time when we'll be discussing the season finale, Empire of Death. Until then, Father Cory Sticha, thank you for joining me and sharing. The Secrets of Doctor Who.
Thank you, Dom.
Jimmy Akin, thank you as well.
Thanks, Tom.
And once again, I'm Dom Bettinelli. Thank you for listening to The Secrets of Doctor Who on StarQuest. And remember, I am the one who waits. Well, not me, but Sutek.